So that's the plan for today. Remembering that everybody really is an ancestor. For some people, the saints may be ancestors. For others, the Buddha or the bodhisattvas may be ancestors. So we all have ancestors. We have our blood root immediate ancestors, and we have other ancestors that maybe we don't connect with, but nevertheless are very powerful in our lives. So this is from a Kabbalist called Akiva, and he said, a net is spread out for the living. Everything is given on loan, and all is preparation for a big celebration. So what does that mean? The net that's spread out for the living, he's talking about what the Buddhists call samsara, the wheel of incarnation, this continual recycling. We're coming in and out of many, many lifetimes. All of us here have been through countless different lifetimes. Some of us are older souls than others and have done more of them. So the net is one of the sentient, sense-bound existence, that we have to handle our senses responsibly, and we have to be careful with how we deal with things like sex, drug, and rock and roll. Everything is given on loan means that it's all impermanent. You can't take it with you. So in a sense, when we die, before, part of the preparation is unpacking your house. So one time you're moving house, but you want to take as little as possible with you. Don't have anything with you. And all this preparation for a big celebration is, as you will see with a near-death experience, it's an amazing thing when you actually go over to the other side. I will describe it. There'll be your ancestors, your loved ones there, other spirit guides from previous lives to greet you. But then we get down to the business of reconciling with our karma, and that's the celebration then becomes into a reconciliation. Now, a little bit about the evidence for the death experiences that I'm going to be talking about. First of all, the near-death experience has been around for eons, but it's been researched in the last century or so by many people who basically went into intensive care units and talked to people who had cardiac arrests, and they all pretty much gave a similar description. By the way, there's a society here called IANS, who you can connect with if you're interested in more details about the near-death experience. But essentially, the feeling is of going up out of your body. They often see themselves being resuscitated. They may go into the nearby waiting room and actually can relate conversations very accurately from the people that are waiting in the waiting room, such as, I want the old girl's Mercedes when she croaks, things like that, which, and they can relate other things when they travel out of body. They can see things outside of the building that can only be found later on by the researchers by something like a helicopter, or really going to great lengths to see them. So this thing is not really what the most scientists would call, it's just a hallucination in your brain because of lack of oxygen. That's not true. It's a real experience. There's a fellow called Ibn Alexander, many of you have probably heard him and read his book, who's written a compelling book about his near-death experience. Before he had one, he didn't believe in any of this because he was a neurosurgeon, and he'd seen many reports of this, and he never gave them any credence whatsoever, and he discounted them. But it's real. So essentially, you go out to your body, you go through this tunnel frequently into the light, you break into the light, and you feel this incredible feeling of love and warmth, almost that you're in the presence of God or Jesus or the Buddha or whoever it is that you're connected to. And then often you come to a gate or a lake or a river, and then you get turned back. It's not your time, you've got to go back. Now, the interesting thing is when people come back, they are completely transformed. They no longer have any doubt about an afterlife. And most of them end up doing some sort of service on the planet, so it changes their life completely. Now, there's also another experience which is more recently described, but I'm sure that it's ancient, called the shared crossing experience, where a loved one who is with somebody who's about to die can go part of the way with their loved one, but not, of course, all the way with them. There's also the Tibetans that described something called a delog or a delok. Dharma Dalma was the most famous. She was dead for 5 days, and she went into all these different realms and came back to describe them. But remember, that's a Tibetan belief, and her realm, her reality is going to be completely different to all of us here. We're all going to be quite unique. Then there are Tibetan masters and Mahayana Buddhists who actually go through the process of meditating and simulating the process of death, just short of cutting off the cord that connects the soul to the body. Now, most of you had experienced waking up with a sudden jolt. That's usually when you're coming back into your body after traveling into the astral in the dream time. So Bushmen are masters at this, this simulation of death. They actually call it the little death experience. And they travel into the spirit world connected with a silver cord, which keeps us alive. You always have to keep that connection. But every now and then, a Bushman who's inexperienced checks out because he somehow loses contact with that silver cord. And I've actually seen a case where the guy nearly checked out completely. They had quite a lot of difficulty reconnecting him to his body. And then, of course, we're going to go into some ancient wisdom and dreams as spiritual practice. And but I wanted to just talk about my own experience because I'm coming from a different point of view. I was initiated in South Africa as a Sangoma in 2002, and I learned all about this from the African perspective, and especially from the point of view of the pathologies of death and how you can correct them. If this is the individual here, and this is the family constellation here, and this is the community, and this is the veil between the worlds, we have on the other side, we have the astral realm, basically, the causal realm, very, very basically. And we have light forces and our ancestors, and we have dark forces on the other side of the veil. But we also have earthbound spirits that never crossed over to the other side and therefore cannot complete their karma and come back again unless they find their way back. So I learned how to diagnose these different conditions with this divination bones. There's many ways to do it, but the divination bones is one way, the very African way of diagnosing these different syndromes. So I came to it from a different sort of point of view. But all of the stuff that I'm talking about, I've pretty much had personal experience of, and I've been able to confirm with ancient wisdom through the African experience and through the dreams and through the channeling that Mary Ellen Kelly and myself have obtained over the years. There are just as many paths in death as there are in life, and that's the important thing to recognize. Everybody is going to have a somewhat different path. Everyone has access to God, but each person has a different access. This was Martin Buber, and this is also very important. We have to really find what it is. What's our access? What does our journey look like? If you listen to the Dalai Lama and many of these yogi teachers and bodhisattva teachers, they'll always say to you, yoga is a tool, Buddhism is a tool, it's not a religion. Take what you want, but keep to your religion. The Dalai Lama is always very fixed on stay with your religion, because you may be a practicing Buddhist and you may mix up things, but at the end of the day you might go to the other side that has to do with your culture, your belief, your inherent belief system, your ancestors. And you don't want to be confused when you get to the other side. So that's really an important thing. Everyone has in him or her something divine, something his own, a chance of perfection and strength, however small, a sphere which God offers him to take or refuse. The task is to find, develop, and to use it. This was a yogi. So we all have a very distinct destiny. We're not going to talk about destiny and karma. That's the subject of the next talk, the end of February. But we are accountable to the extent that we find our destiny and we follow it. We have some unique gift to give. We all have different containers. Some people have small containers and other ones have very large containers. To the people who've been given a big container, much more is expected. But when you're looking at the more enlightened realms, you'll find people on the other side that you might be surprised who are in the enlightened realms. They might be bushmen, they might not read or write, they might be farmers, they might be fishermen. So the rules on the other side are not the same as here. Jesus said, the meek will inherit the earth, which sort of alludes to this whole thing. Those that will be first will be last, those type of things. So we are accountable to not only to our destiny and the thing that we were given to perform in the planet, to help the planet, but we're also accountable for love, for not harming anything, for subordinating our egos to our higher self, and also that's pretty much it for now. We'll talk more next time in about a month's time. Now this is Akiva again. He said everything is preordained, but the choice is ours. So what is this whole conundrum about? Why are we here? Well, I don't know. Nobody really knows. But I think the one thing that's clear from all ancient wisdom is that we are here to perfect the soul. And to do this, we come in and out of many, many, many lifetimes. We are all heading for Christ consciousness, for Buddha consciousness, or for whatever you choose to call it. We're all going to be perfected eventually. It's just a question of how many lifetimes we have. And free will is the cosmic law. So we are here with free will. We're completely entitled to screw up what our destiny is time and time again. We just come back again and again to do it. So this is the power of free will and the power of the balance of light and dark. Choosing light over dark, choosing skillfulness over non-skillfulness. It's not about good or bad. It's about skillfulness and consequences. Rumi said, out there beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there's a field, I'll meet you there. When it gets to the other side, it's all about consequences. Now this is again another Kabbalist who said it should be known that the person is the spirit that is within the body, and the body engarments the person and is not the person. So we actually, this container that I'm in is very different to the containers I've had in previous lives, as it is with all of us. This is not who we are. The spirit, the soul, is who we are, and that goes on forever. That's immortal. It doesn't. It's always there, and it's heading for perfection. The fascinating thing is that most scientists believe that consciousness is still in the mind, is still in the computer, is still in the brain. They don't have a sense that there's something programming the computer, and the soul is part of the program. This is Kabir, a famous Sufi. You said, dying, dying. The world keeps on dying, but no one knows how to die. No one dies in such a way that he won't die again. Well, I wouldn't say no one, but he also said there are very few who find the way. We do eventually find it, but it takes us many, many, many lifetimes. I had a dream once, came with a song that said, "Oh, please don't let me take this trip again." As you'll see, it's not a good idea to keep coming back again and again and again. If we can shortcut our journey of reincarnation, it's a good thing. So this is the ancestors. The choices are yours, and there are consequences to your choices. Consequences are neither reward nor punishment. They're neither good nor bad. They simply are consequences, often not immediate, but always inescapable. So that's what karma is really all about. It's about cause and effect. This is the law of karma, and this is what we are beholden to, and it's pretty unforgiving, although it's much more complex than I'm making out. Some of us have been brought into the planet to perform one little function, and if we do that, then our karma for that lifetime is complete. So it's complicated, but also very simple. Now we're going to talk very briefly about pre-death preparation and how to have a good death. And this is pretty universal across the board. This is about the field, whatever is out there. And the Zohar says that the soul is connected to this 99% realm, this field, and to nourish itself, it visits there when we sleep. Communicates about these visits, information, experiences, and awarenesses in what we call dreams. The sages taught that even if we did not have ancient scriptures, we could be guided to the 99% world by our dreams. This reality that we're in now at the moment is literally 1% of what's out there. This is a tiny microcosmic representation of what's out there, and dreams enable us to really reach into more of the spirit world and more of the field. So yogis and Buddhists seek to pierce the veil, what they call the veil of Maya, the veil of this illusion that this is all we have, with dream practice. And they look at the dream state and death as very much the same thing, as do indigenous people as well. So you have basically three stages. You have death, then you have the intermediate stage of death, which is the astral usually. For most of us, the Tibetans would call it the bardo. And then we have rebirth. We rebirthed into another life, depending on our karma. And if you look at sleep, you have dreamless sleep. It's a deep delta sleep that is dreamless in the early phases of the evening. And then we break into REM sleep, or the dream sleep, And then we awaken to a new day, which is like, being reborn again to the new day. So in the dream, in the REM stage, we are able to travel out of body into the spirit world and across the veil. And usually we end up in the astral, unless we have a higher vibration. And we experience things of pretty much what we're going to experience when we die. We go into parallel universes where there's no time. It's completely timeless. Remember, everything is happening at once on the other side. We see people on the other side that we know in the dream, but we don't know when we come back. These are people from past lives. We may even go into past lives because everything is happening at the same time. And we can actually, because we are not so connected to our ego, we can often remedy some of our own dysfunctions, or at any rate get a sense of what those dysfunctions might be and have a sense of the work we can do. Sometimes we actually do work on the other side. Sometimes we get messages from the dream time to help people on this side. Anybody get dreams for other people? I bet you there are a lot here. We're going to be doing all about this in dreams later. So this is the advantage of the dream state. Who here is a lucid dreamer? The lucid dreamers are very lucky because they can even, in a sense, be more accomplished in handling their karma, because they can navigate those realms voluntarily. They can fly, they can go under the ocean. Some of us do that, but we can't control it. We can breathe under the ocean when we're in the dream time. We can do all kinds of magical things, which we can do in the astral as well, because of course we're not bound to a body anymore. So the dead and the living best meet in this intermediate astral stage, where the veil between worlds is most permeable. When I did my initiation, they used to wake me up at 2 in the morning and drum for me, because the veil is much more permeable at night and much more permeable in the dream state. And we can meet these astral beings, many times our relatives and loved ones, sometimes exotic ancestors we don't recognize, but are obviously ancestors from past lives. That's why we don't think they are from our blood, but they were our mothers and our brothers and our sisters and our lovers maybe long ago. Mostly the dead we encounter are reconciling with their karma in the astral or are earthbound. If you're earthbound, it's very much easier to visit and to present yourself to somebody on this plane, even in daytime visitations, if you're on the earth plane. This is from the ancestors again. Keep to the source of living waters. Do not think to store in cisterns, for they will break and crumble, and the water will be lost. Cup your hands and drink deeply and often, and you will have health and joy. So essentially it's saying attend to your needs and not to your wants. You can't take it with you. Everything is impermanent. And be in the moment, so your spiritual practice is key, and have health and joy. Principles are very different to what we're taught when we grow up. So this is the preparation, essentially these 4 things. The Buddhists have a death meditation, and they say of all the meditations, the meditation on death is probably the most powerful. And we're going to do one soon in the early phase of the talk. But essentially the two next prerequisites are non-attachment to things, the recognition of impermanence, and just to be free of all the mind stuff, the monkey mind stuff. And then attend to the skeletons in the closet. Attend to the unfinished business, and we're going to talk quite a bit about that. So these are the things, the 3 deadly sins of karma, which are ego, judgment, and desirous attachment, or attachment to the object of our desire. The Buddhists might incorporate all of this in one term called self-cherishing. The level of narcissism on the planet has gone to a new height. So I'm sure the Buddhists are kind of concerned about that. And then, of course, the Buddha talked about the 4 rivers of suffering, uncontrolled birth, uncontrolled aging, uncontrolled sickness, and uncontrolled death. Well, the idea of uncontrolled birth is coming into another lifetime to redo the whole conundrum that you did wrongly the last time around. That's an uncontrolled birth. What we hope for is, like the Bodhisattva does, is to be reincarnated into a new life where we can continue our spiritual practice at a higher level. So in that sense, we have some control. We cannot control sickness or aging, but we can control our attitude to it. And likewise, spiritual practitioners look at those things as tests of their spiritual practice. To what extent is when I get sick, can I use this, turn the shit into manure, so to speak? And to what extent when I get old, can I do the same thing? The uncontrolled death is about a death that we're trying to get schooled today about, so that we have some measure of control as to where we go. We don't end up in the wrong vibration. But pre-death preparation, which is all about conscious living, of course, is the best remedy for an uncontrolled death. So these are the phases we're going to chat about. Release, the initial release. Then we pass over. Then there are different vibratory realms. And then finally, the pathologies of death that we'll talk about that you don't want to really have to deal with, and they're very easy to avoid. So the first thing is your state of mind is very important. You have to be in a clear state of mind without any fear. So Gandhi was heard to be saying the name of God when he was shot. Ram, Ram, Ram. He wanted to get his vibration out of the violence of his death. You also probably know that if you look at the dream world, if you're in a bad vibration before you go to sleep, maybe you had a bit too much to drink, or you're even too hot, or you saw some terrible TV program or some terrible violent thing, it pushes you in a bad vibration, and oftentimes you end up in a realm that's not that pleasant. Anybody have that experience? Some realms are nice, they're fine, they're fun, they're cool. Other ones are almost demonic. So your attitude of mind is absolutely key when you travel over. You have to create the reality you want with intention, but you can't fake it. You can't be in the mafia and suddenly decide that you're going to create this reality, by just thinking the right thoughts. Your state of mind will determine your reality, and your state of mind will be determined by how many skeletons are there in the family closet, and what is your karma and your good and your bad, because there will be all kinds of demons around you if you've created a mafia-like reality. You should have fearless clarity, no confusion whatsoever. Release from attachment, surrender, detach, let go. You have to sort of go into an existential free fall and just let go, release, be non-attached to anything whatsoever. Attend to the present moment. In other words, you want to be able to hear the voices of the ancestors calling you home. You want to be able to see the light and go in the direction of the light. All these things are really important, which you're not going to be able to do if you have a confused, very fearful death. So we're going to do a meditation now, and that'll hopefully allow you to look at some of the things that maybe are the skeletons in the closet. Because it's the beginning of the year, I'm making the point that these meditations, the ancestors have been very strong about the idea of a sensory meditation. They feel that when you are involved with the senses, you can be closer to God. And, so if you ever go to an African church, you can feel what it's like because it's a sensory service. There's singing and dancing, and it's palpably different to anything else you do. Blacks in South Africa say we pray by singing and dancing. Well, we can't really dance here. It would get a bit chaotic. But that might be a good thing sometime. So I'm going to give you this music which has a certain vibration, but the point of the music is not to listen in this case to the words. It's about a golden chariot. That was the words that I had when I got the song in the dream, and I had the song that came with the dream. And we all are capable of having a golden chariot taking us, kind of like Ezekiel, up into the heavens. We all have that potential. We all have the ability to do that. We all are going to do that eventually. It's just a question of when we do it. So when it comes to the meditation, listen to the music and see where it takes you. Something you might want to think about is, imagine somebody as an exercise in non-attachment. Imagine you being dead and somebody living in your house and wearing your clothes and sleeping with your spouse, and she or he is even happier than they were with you. And your kids are happier than you were, this type of thing. You can, and maybe taking over your business and your job and doing a better job than you. Those are the things that are going to keep us from going. Like, oh my God, I'm not going to be this, or my Maserati, who's going to take care of my Maserati? These are the things you don't want to be thinking about when you die. So just close your eyes and relax completely. Close your eyes, take some deep breaths in and out. Breathe in white light, breathe out thick black smoke. Breathe in what you want as white light. Breathe out what you don't want as thick black smoke. During the meditation, you can breathe out anything you want to get rid of as thick black smoke, something that might be an impediment to you in the passing over. And fully expand your lungs, front to back, side to side, up to down. And just follow the breath and then follow the music and use whatever thing you want to use to help you master whatever it is that you may feel you need to master. just slowly come on back to your bodies. Let your breathing get back down to normal. And move around a little bit. Okay, back to the talk. There are 3 levels of mourning, with tears, with silence, and with song. That with song is the fullest and the most complete. So just as I think it's easier to sort of get into a divine space with the sensory in the right way, it is also easier to mourn with song. So there's a lot to be said for the Irish wakes. Africans, again, when they mourn, they wail, they cry, they sing, they dance, they drum. It's different. So it's just a suggestion. Death rituals. Now these are really, really important. You know, the obituaries, the accolades, the prayers, flowers, incense, proper burial, praises at the burial site, death stone. People want to know that they counted for something, that there was meaning to their life. And also you need to sort of complete any special requests. It's not a good idea if somebody wanted to be buried under their favorite tree to cremate them. You know, that can sort of hold the spirit back and make them earthbound. Or to put the ashes in the basement when they asked you to maybe scatter them over the ocean. They want their wishes to be fulfilled. It's really much more important than maybe we realized, because they are alive, they're not dead, and then it's sort of a contract that hasn't been completed. Spirits also need to know from their loved ones that it's okay to leave. And also important is when they, as you'll see, there's an early phase where they are they're earthbound for the first part of their death. Sometimes they can get held back there as well. And then they also need to know that time is over for mourning. Usually the mourning takes about a year for most, more for some people. If there's child's involved, often a lot more than that. But there will come a time when you really want to be able to give the spirit permission to go back to the astral where they have to do their reconciliation, and not to hold them back again. There are actually some quite clever movies that you can watch around this, where the spirits hang around and are a great comfort to the person, but they can't stay forever. Forgiveness is key, as we're going to see when we come to the dysfunctions of death. We have to forgive those that have wronged us and let them know, and also ask for forgiveness from those that we need to ask forgiveness from. That's part of the skeletons in the family closet. Now this is more from the Tibetan standpoint. Remember, the Tibetans say, you know, that you reincarnate within 49 days. You know, you die and then you go over to the bardo, and then within 49 days you reincarnate. Well, that's not been my experience, and because I've had uncles and family who've been dead for eons, who've now showed up as spirit guides for me. There's no time on the other side, so everything is happening at once. We are constrained by time. It's a timelessness over there. So for what may be 10 or 15 years for us, maybe a millisecond for them. So I don't agree with the Tibetan thing that you reincarnate in 49 days, but maybe it applies to Tibetans and they create that reality. Maybe it applies to the bodhisattvas, because they are so complete that they either go up to the Pure Land or they reincarnate back into another incarnation where they can continue the spiritual practice. But it's an interesting thing, because the initial phases are the same for everybody. This is what they read the Tibetan Book of the Dead to the body for a period of 49 days. Obviously, after a few days, they cremate the body and they scatter the ashes on a mountaintop. But they continue to read the Tibetan Book of the Dead for 49 days, which I think is commendable. Now, Africans also have rituals to try and prevent people from becoming earthbound, which is a problem. So these are the principles of the Tibetan book that I gleaned. You are dead. Go forward. Release without fear. Do not cling to the images of the past or the illusory projections of mind. This is narrow mind, monkey mind, not the big mind. It's the mind of the addictions and compulsions and habituations that we have that hold us in our karma as well. Recognize your own luminescence, the luminescence of your own soul, your Christ consciousness, your Buddha consciousness, the part of you made in the image of God. Let go, surrender. So the principles are very much the same, but the reality on the other side, once you get there, is going to be very different. Crossing over, though, it's the same for everybody. Now, my experience is that most people, most spirits hang around the earth plane approximately for a month. And they hang around for closure or for visitations, and sometimes they hang around for longer to help, and sometimes they hang around because they don't know they're dead, as we'll talk about. They're earthbound. So they can visit in this 30 days, and this is why they usually visit. They visit to announce their death. Sometimes you're not in a position to be able to receive the news. You might be overseas and you'll have a dream about a loved one who's about to pass. Sometimes you even have a situation where you dream about their death before it happens, a week before even. The spirit is already going out of the body, close to death. They're already talking to their ancestors, seeing their ancestors. They can travel to different realms. They can come and visit you almost like in the dream time. The veil is much more permeable as you get closer and closer to death, so that can easily happen. They also come to complain they have not been properly put to rest or request attention. For instance, why haven't you scattered my ashes yet, type of thing. They have closure, last visit to reassure, unfinished business. Maybe everybody's looking around for the will and they don't know where you put it, They come back to tell you, or they come back to say, there's money hidden under the mattress or something like that. So, and often they can't come to see the person they want to talk to. They'll come to somebody who's easier to reach and they give them a message. Please tell them this. It's kind of getting somebody else's mail. Most important, they come to ask or give forgiveness, and later on they can become spirit guides, but initially not really spirit guides, but they can hang around for a while. So this is from the ancestors, and they say there are as many varieties and paths in death as there are in life. Countless ones. Countless realms, countless vibrations. It is not unusual for one to linger between the worlds for a period of time after death. And when called upon, may respond so that the exchange can purify and strengthen the spirit of the sentient being and that of the one passing on. So like I said, sometimes people know that they're earthbound and they are planning to go back to the other side, but they're hanging around initially just to be of help, to be of support. The opposite can also be true. They might hang around, but their being there might really be very, very disturbing to the person who is grieving. So if they show up in a dream or a visitation, it kind of freaks them out rather than reassures them. So they can be stuck because they want to see that this person is going to be okay, and that may keep them earthbound, or they may choose to be earthbound for a while, remembering that when somebody is earthbound, they can come much more easily in dreams and in daytime visitations because they're not across the veil yet. So these are the very basic realms. Like I said, there are countless ones, but there's celestial and angelic. There's the causal realm. This is the realm of the enlightened beings, the bodhisattvas, the saints, the gurus. These beings do not have to come back. They have already fulfilled their destiny. They only choose to come back if they want to come back. The Gandhis and the Krishnamurtis and the Mandelas of the world. When they do come back, it's actually not a fun time. So they know that they're coming to probably end up with a martyr's death. Then there's the astral or the imaginal realm, which is where we're going to go, most of us here, and we're going to talk quite a bit about that. This is basically a realm where we go to reconcile. If you like, it's a school for the higher self. It's where we sort out the things we didn't do before. And then there are the lower realms, of which there are many as well, the realms of the so-called hungry ghosts. They're called hungry ghosts because their cravings get even more exaggerated and cannot be fulfilled. So the one way, and just to mention it to get it out the way, true spirit possession does happen. Anybody see that movie by Oprah called Beloved? Scary movie, but those things really do happen. People can get possessed, not people in this audience. They usually are very vulnerable, and we'll talk about some of those things a little bit later. But they can get possessed by a demonic, disembodied spirit who has little hope of ever being reincarnated. In Kabbalah, they call it a dibuk, which means a demonic spirit who can actually possess you. And we're lucky to have a great pope now on the planet. And interestingly enough, last year he actually had a convention where they got hold of a whole bunch of exorcists together. I guess it was a new CEU thing for exorcists, so they could get the exorcist credits. But the fact of the matter, he's endorsing the fact that the only thing that's going to help these people is somebody who has the skill to do an exorcism, because it makes as much sense as giving them psychotherapy or medication makes as much sense as taking out the appendix when their gallbladder needs to be removed. It's just not going to work. So here are the basic principles. We are carried by our hearts and our karma to the realm, to the vibration we feel most at home. You can only go where you can vibrate to. Now, you might go to a lower vibration than you deserve if you have a bad death, but then eventually you'll sort things out and you'll go to the right one, but it won't be that pleasant and it'll take a little bit of doing. We lose touch with those we can no longer vibrate with. So your loved ones might actually end up in a lower or higher vibration. Spiritual masters can travel freely through all the realms. To others, the higher realms are invisible. Now, they can come down and help us, as they often do when we're in the astral realm. They can give us advice, and as you'll see, they can help guide us with our reconciliation process. So it's much more complicated than this, but I'm sort of a simple surgeon, so I like to make things simple. Basically, there's three possibilities. You can reconcile and return, reincarnate, come back again to repeat what you didn't do the last time around. You can imagine the frightening prospect that somebody has who, say, has had a very unskillful lifetime. For instance, maybe a father who beat the hell out of his son every day, and he's going to be faced now with coming back into a lifetime very similar to that lifetime, or the alcoholic or the drug addict who's going to have to be faced with coming into a similar lifetime and being able to overcome that particular malfunction so that they can bring their soul up to a somewhat higher level. So you'll see how important this is when it comes to forgiveness. You can become a guide, and like I say, guides often show up many, many years after death. Anybody here can confirm that somebody dies and then 5 years later they start seeing them in dreams or showing up? Some maybe. Yeah. You can become a guide, but I don't think you can decide to become a guide. They will let you know. Basically, you've lost all control. And there are instances where apparently you can graduate to a higher realm, even to the causal realm. I've heard the word called Summerland to describe sort of a transition realm where you go and you eventually can graduate to this higher realm, kind of like going to summer school. You didn't quite make the grade, and you go to summer school, and then eventually you make the grade. But you're not completely set in stone, but you really have to have quite good karmic brownie points for that. So a little bit about spirit guides, because the last part of our talk will focus more on that. Spirit guides are not subject to time or space, as are we. They are always around, but not always to be known. Always within call, but not always to be heard. Always present, but not always to be sensed. Always holding us, but not always to be felt. So the fact you don't see them and you don't know who they are doesn't mean they aren't there. And the one rule to remember, you have to ask to receive. Because of free will, they cannot help you unless you ask. And you have to be very specific about how you ask. You can't ask, for instance, what should I do with my life? Tell me, because they can't do that. Even they know what your destiny is, because they have access to your karmic life book, but they're not allowed to tell you within the realm of free will. So the astral is governed by accountability, which is done with the process of witnessing. There's actually a funny movie with Meryl Streep called Defending Your Life. Anybody see it? Yeah, it's really very good. It's a metaphor for how things happen. There's a prosecutor and a defendant, and you have these different witnesses who will help you negotiate and see your unskillfulness. In a sense, you do have a video rerun of your life where you're able to see all the things that you did wrong. The thing about it, there can be no denial, because the field, that side, the other side of the veil, the astral, is embedded with truth and love. So your lawyer can't help you here, you know. What goes for politics doesn't go for the astral. What goes for business doesn't go for the astral. So some people, I think, have an alarming, sort of reorientation when they go over to the other side, because they thought they were doing a good job, but in reality it counts for nothing whatsoever. So truth and love, and I think when Jesus said the truth will set you free, that's probably one of the reasons, one of the things that he may have meant. So the interesting thing also is, those of you that are dreamers, you retain the persona, your language, your culture, sometimes your religion, your apparel. Often you'll see them in the same clothes that they used to wear, or the clothes that they now want to wear. It's interesting when you get possessed. Oftentimes you see possession in Africa. The spirit will often come in and want to wear the garment that they're familiar with. This is true possession, but it's temporary, it's voluntary possession, unlike the other involuntary possession. They maybe want to smoke a cigarette because now they can actually enjoy a cigarette, or have a beer or something like that, because now they're in a body and they can feel it and taste it. And that's the reason people sometimes get truly possessed. Of course, that's the involuntary type of possession. So one can gain new knowledge on the other side. So you're not completely stuck, but you can't do much with it unless you're a guide. Maybe you realize on the other side that this was your destiny. Your destiny was to do, something, and you can find somebody to be with, and maybe hang around so you can learn something. You won't remember any of it when you go back to the other side, but some of it will be impressioned in your soul memory. So frequently, you have people that come into the planet who just seem to know things very easily. They accommodate to complex concepts very easily. That's not because they're smart, it's because they know at some deep deja vu level that this is true, and they remember it more easily. So you can gain new knowledge. You can release from prior dysfunctions, all the mind stuff that we were talking about, the problems that have to do with our monkey mind, our addictions, our habituations, our habits that are not so good. And the good news is sex happens, soul and love bonds occur for the same vibration. So, but we'll see how all of these things happen. You travel with will, with passion, that's why you're led with the heart. You travel with intention and thought, and you travel with imagination. Anybody here see What Dreams May Come by Robin Williams? Also a good Hollywood-style movie to watch, because all the principles of the movie are true. They did their homework pretty well. But he's with a guide on the other side, and this guy is teaching him how to travel with imagination. The reality is that we can create the reality immediately on the other side, whereas it takes us time, because we're time-bound on this side, to create our own reality. But the principle that we create our own reality is 100% true, both on this side and on the other side. A few words about imagination. There's kind of a funny story about a guy who goes over to heaven. By the way, Bishop Tutu says the standards for heaven are very low. The reason is it's not kind of really like heaven, it's the astral. I have a friend who says that the astral can sometimes be like being locked up in Costco, but being able to buy anything you want, but you can't get out of Costco. So the standards for Costco are not that high. But anyway, this is the thing about the guy who comes back, he goes to the other side, and he's with this guide, and the guy says, now you can imagine anything you want. And he says, anything? He says, yeah, anything you want. Imagine it, you have it. So he's an avid golfer, so he decides he's going to imagine playing golf, And of course, he's got this gorgeous golf course. It's just absolutely magnificent. And he's, the problem is every time he hits the ball, it's a hole-in-one, because you imagine what you want. So the interesting thing about the astral is that all your desires and your imaginations eventually get boring and dissipate. So you get to the point where there is no time, so you're not experiencing time. It's not like, oh, hell, I've been here 100 years, it's time for me to reincarnate, because it's timeless. But you get to the point where you say, look, I can be a guide because I said I could be, or I've got to go back, and you end up going back. But that might be 20, 30, 50 years later. So anyway, he goes back to his guide, and he says, that's kind of boring. What can I do now? He says, well, imagine anything you want. And he always thought, well, it would be nice to have a harem. So, he reckons he'll imagine 20 gorgeous women. And then the same thing happens, after a while he goes and he says, no, this is not much fun. And he says, maybe we should go and take a look at hell, because maybe it's more interesting down there. So the guide says to him, no, sir, you are in hell. So in a sense, Costco can be hell. The astral can be hell. So, and Tutu is right. The standards for heaven are very low. They're also, but you don't want to get into the lower realms. That's one thing, that's for sure. The one interesting thing about sex, although it happens in the imagination, what's interesting if you're looking at the dreams as correlation, is that if you are thinking of you having a sexual dream and you're actually having an orgasm, in fact in the man it would be a wet dream, the actual experience is happening in the imaginal realm, but it's translating into your body because you're still connected with a cord. So it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition of how things can be on the other side, because you can have that same experience, but of course, because you're not in a body, it will be different. So this is Meister Eckhart, who said when the soul wants to experience something, she throws out an image of the experience in front of her and steps into it. And this is really what it's about. There's actually an interesting thing where the spirit in the play is trying to move some bells, and initially fails because you can't take your hand and move anything. You actually have to imagine yourself doing it and then project your whole being, your thought process, your imagination into the action, and then it'll happen. So if you're in a house and things are moving around, lights are going on and off, computers are crashing, all that's within the realm of possibility of the spirit world. And especially it's more the tricksters that like to do that. Or alternatively, it's your own ancestors trying to get your attention to say, hey, I'm here. They can also make animals come to you. Like some people will say, the day that my mom died, I see butterflies around me all the time. So they can do that sort of stuff for you to let you know that they're here. They can manipulate energy fields. So what about the dysfunctions of death? Well, there are a few of them. A shade, it's a word I learned in Africa. It means an intrusive spirit, and interestingly enough, it's a Hebrew word as well, which means a ghost. And there are two kinds of shades. The one kind of shade is this type, one that relates to guilt, shame, remorse, self-condemnation, the skeletons in the family closet. Now, there are a few principles with regard to the forgiveness that I think require things to be stressed. The commandment in the Old Testament is honor your father and mother, and it's the only commandment that says that your days will be long upon the earth. So if you were to ask a Sangoma in South Africa, why does it say that? They would say, well, clearly, if you honor your grandmothers and grandfathers and mothers and fathers, they will watch out for you, they will take care of you from the other side, you'll be supported in life, and your days will be long upon the earth, and they will be more blessed. But the important thing about this, the onus is on the child to forgive the parent, not the other way around. And this is probably one of the most important things I do in the work that I do with bones and so on, is recognizing shades and then helping the person forgive the shade so that they can go to the other side. Because what happens is that if somebody, take for example that man who was beating his son every day, he's now faced with the idea of coming back into the planet to do that whole thing again, and it's a formidable feeling and thought. So they usually hang around the living to try and get their attention often they'll hang around not the one that needs the attention, but maybe the one who can receive the message. And so they usually tend to be more spiritually inclined, and they'll go to a psychic or somebody, a shaman, and then they'll be able to tell them, hey, this grandfather's hanging around you as an intrusive spirit and he's looking for forgiveness. What happened? And then, of course, everything will come out. I'll give you many examples of, interesting examples of how, the ones I've seen in my past experience. But that's what happens. And when that happens, it's absolutely essential that because of the commandment, honor your father and mother, you are kind of duty-bound to forgive and release. Now, there's 3 reasons to forgive and release. There's nothing good about being haunted by a shade. And oftentimes these people are haunted and their luck isn't good. It's not that the shade means them any harm. It's not like possession. But you don't want to have the energy field of a ghost around you, whether it's in your house or whether it's in your hotel room that you've gone to visit. Obviously, short term, it doesn't really matter. So you want to get rid of any shades. They do not belong in the place that they are. And the best way to get rid of them is to forgive them and release them with some sort of a ritual, sometimes with the help of some kind of psychic or shamanic type of personality. Haunting can cause anxiety, depression, difficulty with relationships, all sorts of weird things happening. The other reason you want to forgive is that, there's another Old Testament thing that says the sins of the fathers and mothers are visited upon the children to the 4th generation. Now, that doesn't mean that if your father stole something, you are accountable for his karmic blemish. But what it does mean is that these ancestors reincarnate back into the same bloodline again and again, at least up until the 4th generation, because somehow it seems easier for them to reconcile with their karma that way. So you do not want an unreconciled spirit, an ex-alcoholic, coming back as your grandson or your great-grandson, or maybe even, depending on your age, as your child. So that's another very practical reason that can get your attention. Remember, forgiveness doesn't mean you have to have anything to do with them. Either when they're on the planet or when they're on the other side, you don't want them as your spirit guide. You just want to forgive them and release them, get them off your back, literally. It's like carrying a skeleton on your back the whole time. You're carrying the skeletons in the closet on your back through your life, in a sense. The third reason to forgive is we always knew it was a good thing. You release the burden. You've got this albatross hanging around your neck that you don't need. But now neuroscience is showing that it's healthful for you to forgive. Your immune system improves, your health improves, you can document it. Forgiveness is not only a spiritual thing to do, but it's a healthful thing to do. So nothing good about being haunted. Now, earthbound spirits are also shades, but they have a different pathology. The treatment of a shade that's that needs forgiveness is forgiveness and a ritual to do it. It can be a little more tricky. An earthbound spirit occurs for the following reasons. Firstly, no proper death rituals. They might still be hanging around because they don't like their death stone, for instance. Attachments to persons, places, work, or objects. Fear and confusion. They don't even know they're dead. They sometimes are having conversations with people and wondering why no one's talking back to them. It's interesting that the movie industry capitalizes on a lot of these things that people regard as quaint and mythological, but they are very, very real. Death is sudden, traumatic, suicide, murder, war, drugs. Sudden death can be extremely confusing. So, for instance, war is a bad one, because if you look at PTSD, it might be that the PTSD isn't just due to the trauma, but some of these unfortunate people, veterans, may be haunted by the ghosts on war fields, that are coming back to haunt them. And the Zulus, who were warrior people, knew all about this. When they would go to war, it was hand-to-hand combat in those days. They would disembowel the person that they had killed, and they would release the spirit, and they would apologize and say, look, no hard feelings. I'm just doing what I have to do, And then they'd come back from the battle, and the medicine men and women would cleanse them and make sure that they were free of all encumbrances. Abortion or miscarriage, same reason. Child spirit might be lost between the worlds, confused. False beliefs. This guy Dawkins, who's written the book The God Delusion, may be in for an earthbound existence, or a very confused existence if he really believes what he says, where he'll go to a realm which manifests what he's written about. It usually doesn't happen forever, though. Now, where do they hang around? Well, they hang around homes. It's often an old lady who's died in a home, and they're either confused or they're lost or they're attached in some way. And it's interesting now, you actually have to report if somebody's died in a house you want to sell, you have to let people know. So there's obviously enough consciousness out there that you want to know if anybody's died in the house and if there's a spirit hanging around. They hang around workplaces. These are the control freaks, that really want to micromanage the business, even though they on the other side, they might not even know they're stuck between the worlds. Hospitals are rife with earthbound spirits. People have had traumatic deaths, confused deaths, and this is the cause. Doctors won't admit this, but I know it's to be true. The cause of Murphy's Law. You have a doctor who comes into the hospital, or a nurse, and they're going to have surgery or anything done. Things go wrong, inexplicably wrong. It may be somebody who died, doesn't particularly like nurses or doctors, and wants to get their own back. So warfields are full of them as well, jails, cemeteries for obvious reasons, and objects special to the person who died. So for instance, war objects, like weapons, samurai swords, or maybe rifles, old ones, be careful of. Demonic looking masks from Africa or New Guinea, the new ones are okay. But if it's an old one, be very careful. You don't know who wore that mask. It might have been a witch or something like that. Every now and then, you'll come across somebody who's got one of these Tibetan demons on their wall because it's kind of quaint. Not a good idea. It can be, not to say that the spirit will be there, but it can be energetically polluted, which could affect you as well. I can tell you, if there's time, we don't have any particular questions, I can tell you some interesting stories around that. People who messed with sacred objects. Whatever you do, if it's sacred, don't go near there. Be very, very careful. Whenever you wander around Native American sites and pick up things, be careful. Entities attached because of a breach in the host energy field. We all have an aura, and some people, unfortunately, for whatever reason, the aura has been broken, either for all these different reasons, or sometimes these spirits are attracted even subconsciously. Some people might go to an old cowboy town and be kind of encouraging to an old cowboy spirit who happened to live there. Not a good idea. It might be a quaint idea to say, you've got a cowboy hanging around you, but it's not cool. Drugs, alcohol, and sex that break the aura. So by the way, remember that people, these intrusive spirits, a true possession can actually experience sensations. But somebody who's just attached, an intrusive spirit, can get off vicariously, off on sex and drugs and alcohol, especially if they're habituated in that way. So they may want to hang around. But this is not anybody in this audience. It would be somebody who's really had a broken aura. Severe trauma, sickness, fatigue, extremes of anger, fear, grief, shame, abuse. Frequently, the people who are possessed, truly possessed, have gone through terrible forms of abuse, often in satanic cults or so on, and those are the ones that are very hard to treat. Trance states, shamanic rituals, channeling, seances, Ouija boards, all this sort of thing. I'm all in favor of shamanism and shamanic rituals. That's sort of how I started. But now there's a tremendous new consciousness going around, and a lot of folks are going to foreign countries and also in California and taking mind-altering substances. And I think I would recommend they do it. It's a good thing to do, but be very careful of where you do it and who you do it with. And if you can, be very careful of the people who are in the group where you do it with, because when you open up yourself to the field, you invite in spirits, and your aura may not be completely intact, and something might attach. So you really have to have a space that's very, very well protected, and a shaman who knows what they're doing. It's like going to the right neurosurgeon. You wouldn't go and just go to the yellow pages and find out who your neurosurgeon is going to be. Remember that if you go to things like seances and you use Ouija boards, usually the spirits that come through there are very low-level spirits. They're tricksters. They're kind of having fun. Because they're not localized in space and time, they have access to information. They can pretend to be your mother or father and not really be. They might know things about you because they have access to that non-local information. And contact with the corpse, also very important. At least if you think about the Leviticus, you go to Leviticus, you can see that if an Israelite had attended to a dead body, they were not allowed back into the community unless they had purified themselves for a period of a week. And a Sangoma who attends a funeral will not see a client or have anything to do with anybody until they have purified themselves, and at least for the next 24 hours. I thought what I would do is maybe focus on the ancestors in this part, because it's so much part of the death experience and also conscious living. And I just thought I'd let you have some of the wisdom from the horse's mouth, so to speak, and so that you know where this came from. So this is the first one. There's no free will across the veil. The dead depend on the living to repair. Now we're talking about the astral realm. The dead depend on the living to repair, complete, forgive, and release them if such is needed. So this is really what we've been talking about in quite great detail. And out of that little sentence comes a lot of wisdom and a lot of information. The important thing to realize is that in the astral, we lose free will. We no longer have any free will. So for instance, when I do a bone divination, I work with a spirit guide who's a black woman who was a Sangoma in her previous life. And she didn't quite complete everything she wanted to do or needed to do in her previous life. So she can work through me. So she works with my free will, through my free will, and she helps me, and we help people, and I help her. In Zulu they say pagamisa. It helps to lift her up. It lifts her to another level. And I'm pretty sure that you can do karmic work on the other side through somebody else's free will. You can't do anything of your own accord. So when dead, you can influence on behalf of others, but not for yourself. The last chance for determining and acting for your own mission and fulfillment is with your last earthly breath. You are then stuck with how you are and where you were. On the other side, we no longer have options upon which to decide what fashions our destiny. We have already determined it. Kind of serious stuff, this, isn't it? We no longer have options. We have already determined it. We do, however, still have thought, intent, and opinion, which we may use to help others, though no longer ourselves. Thus, the ancestors need our help just as we need theirs. So it's a symbiotic relationship, and that's how we should formulate our ancestral practice. We can't keep asking for things without giving. So how do we give? We give forgiveness, love, and gratitude are how we help them. And we remember them. You know, if you have Thanksgiving meal, put out a plate of food, remember them. Talk to your kids and grandkids about them. Christmas, invite them to the celebration. Remember them on the day that they were born or that they died. It's an ongoing conversation, even though nobody is talking back to you. Keep on talking. It's like having a pen pal who never writes back, but you love the pen pal, so you know they're reading the letter and they're doing whatever they can to help you. Lesser vibrations emanate some more from degree of narrow mind. This is the monkey mind. And if you look at Patanjali and his sheaths of consciousness, there were two minds. The one is the intellectual mind, the Buddha mind, the big mind, and the other one is the monkey mind, the narrow mind. These vibrations are emanating from narrow mind. They're often viewed as needing to sort out and work through their own calling. They're in the astral, but they have some serious karmic work to do. Beware of those on either side of the veil who would make you their resolution and much less their absolution. So remember that spirit guides, your loved ones that you knew that are your guides, you know them, so you can trust them. The ones that you didn't like or you don't want to have anything to do with, like I say, forgive them, release them. You don't want to have any more thing to do with them. Forgiveness doesn't mean you have to negotiate more with them. But these are lower level spirits that may hang around and often have their own agendas. Your own ancestors also they're not enlightened beings. So remember, they can be wrong. They might have their own agendas. But also remember, they've been through a reconciliation process. So they may not be the zealot religious Christian that they were in real time. They may have reformulated a lot of their opinions. But so they can really help you a lot. And they are, in a sense, as the Africans would say, they've been purified. But these are actually beings that sometimes have their own agendas and may want to manipulate you on their behalf, or sometimes they're trying to manipulate you on the behalf of a loved one. They might send a dream that says, you should do a business transaction with this person, but the person that you're doing the business transaction happens to be the sun that's on the planet. So it's a sort of nepotism from the other side, if you like. Enlightened beings, perfected souls, have full use of their faculties and so do not have to reincarnate, although they may choose to incarnate to support and guide. We mentioned this before. These are the bodhisattvas and the sages and the wisdom keepers who don't need to come back, but they know that they need to help. I just want to say a word of endorsement for the black sheep of the family. The black sheep of the family is usually the white sheep of the family. And often what happens is that they've been assigned a task. Often they fail in the task, but that doesn't mean their karma has failed. They've fulfilled their karmic obligation. They might come back as a child who wants to be a musician and plays guitar, but his father is some important CEO who's a multi-millionaire, and looks at his son as a complete loser because he never knew how to play baseball. All he wanted to do was play his guitar. And he sort of gets ostracized from the family and victimized and never gets any credit. But in fact, he's done his job, but he just nobody listened to the message, And so the black sheep is frequently the white sheep of the family. Somebody who comes to bring something to the family that they're lacking. And sometimes they succeed, but mostly in my experience, they tend to fail. But it doesn't matter from their own particular point of view. So remember that enlightened beings have full free will. Those of us in the astral do not. Those in the higher causal realms can make themselves known to those in the lower astral realms. However, those in the astral cannot vibrate to a higher level at their own volition or aspiration. Those of higher vibrations can hear and respond to lesser ones, in addition to seeking them out. These may be the guides that come to help you witness. They may be your loved ones that are at a higher level than you are, but come down to sort of hang out a little bit and to try and help you and encourage and support you. But they belong in a different realm, and you can't go to where they are. You cannot get there. The sages who have died are present in this world to a greater extent than when they were alive. This is from the Zohar. So just because they're dead and we don't necessarily know who they are and what they're doing, they are doing work in the world. They're helping us. They may be channeling through somebody. Lots of people are channeling information. Things are pretty desperate, so if anything, they're more active now than they've ever been before. They have a tremendous advantage in being non-local in space and time. So your ancestors have the same advantage. They can be in Johannesburg and New York and Santa Barbara all at once. They can see at least immediately into the future, so they can warn you about an upcoming journey. They can see that particular business partner that you may be wanting to go into business with, and they know that he's not honest, and you don't know that, and they can warn you. So by not being localized in space, by being in many places at once, and in time, they know your past, they know your karmic life book, they can really be of help to you, guiding you along your path. Now we're just going to do one last meditation and we'll end off and then take time for questions. If there are a lot, I'll stay on until afterwards. This is a song I had, and often I just get the first two lines and then I make up the rest based on what the ancestors have said. And this is pretty much what the last part of the talk is about. He found the wings of love. That's us down below. The wings that soar far above may not be seen or heard, have not the spoken word. Sometimes they do speak to you, you can hear them, but frequently it's telepathic, or it's a gut feeling, or it's an animal that they bring to you. There are different ways of connecting with you. Those wings fly high at night, are made of love, not spite. They're called with gratitude. They are polite, not rude. I learned that from my teachers in South Africa. Don't be rude to your ancestors. If you're a Zulu ancestor, he'll hit you over the head with a 4x4. What happened to my teacher when he was rude to his ancestor? They come in dreams, they say, are never far away. They can see beyond the veil. They do not often fail. They're not completely infallible, but they know a lot more than we do. They are our spirit guides. They sometimes seem to hide, but they are always there if we just show we care. We have to give them acknowledgement, gratitude. They show forgiveness too, because they do love you. They know us from before, and they're here to help us more. Many of the people we encounter in this lifetime are ones we knew many, many times. The friends we'll be hanging out with are the same friends or people we knew before. Many of the relations are people we had before. They need our caring love to reach them up above, that help to raise them up, like I said in Zulu, pagamisa, and fill their empty cup. Their stay is not sublime. It's not that much fun there. A place that has no time till they return again from where they can't remain. They start off all alone back in their newfound home to make their soul like light in the Creator's sight. So let's just do another sensory meditation and then dwell on anything that from the talk that's meaningful to you to meditate on and to imagine, visualize. Imagine the positive, imagine you being in a state where you have mastered and accomplished all of what you wanted to gain from the talk. And everything begins in the imagination. As you think it, so it can be. As you believe it, so it will be. And all of that depends more powerfully on an imagination. So you don't have to listen to the words. You've pretty much heard them. Rather, focus on the meditation and where it's going to help you.
He found the wings of love, those wings so far above, may not be seen or heard, have not the spoken word. Those wings fly high at night, are made of love, not spite. They're called with gratitude, they are polite, not rude. They come in dreams, they say, are never far away, can see beyond the veil, and do not often fail. They are our spirit guides, that sometimes seem to hide, but they are always there, if we just show we care. They show forgiveness too, because they do love you. They know what's from before, they're there to help us more. They need our caring love to reach them up above, that help to raise raise them up and fill their empty cup. This day is not sublime, a place that has no time, till they return again from where they can't remain. They start off all alone, back in a newfound home, to make their soul like light in their Creator's sight, in the Creator's sight.
Okay, well, I guess come back to your normal state of consciousness, and breathing and move around. Just end off with a couple of other teachings. The ancients would ask of you to perform good deeds, speak good words and think good thoughts in their memory. They would want you to be a repository of the instructions, teachings, and their righteous and loving ways. The ancestors cannot say, but simply alert, advise, and warn, and only according to your openness and willingness. They cannot change you or deter you from your own insistency, no matter to what it is due. Only you can choose to change, such as the design of free will. It's interesting that, in the work that I do, sometimes I have somebody come for bones and they can't give up the thing that they want to give up. And once you know that, you can't actually do rituals for them or anything on their account. You have to be able to give permission. Often it's to do with a relationship, that's dysfunctional, but it's just very hard for them to break away from it. So it's unconscionable really to do any rituals, and ineffective because the ancestors won't help you. They will not help you help them unless they have willingly given up what it is they want to give up. They have to give permission. Sometimes people want it in writing. That's why sometimes the forgiveness rituals have to be quite severe. Oftentimes people will come and say, no, but I forgave him. But at some level they know in spirit world that you didn't, and that you're hanging on to some stuff, and they want the forgiveness to be more complete. So in summary, the preparation is about conscious living, the death and dying, passing over, non-attachment, letting go, skeletons in the closet, pathology, shades, intrusive spirits, earthbound spirits, possession. Again, somebody came up, be clear that true spirit possession is very different to an intrusive spirit. Intrusive spirit is very common, we have them around us a lot of the time. They're not going to really do us any serious harm. True spirit possession is a whole other story. Fortunately, it's very rare, and the only thing that will really fix that is to go and see a good exorcist. Karma, reconciliation, reincarnation, basically you don't get away with nothing. And the afterlife realms, the astral is not a lot of fun. So let's take some questions. Okay, so how can we help those that may be stuck on, and you mean earthbound spirits? Or,
yeah, loved ones who are maybe stuck.
Yeah, well, there are really only two things one can do. One is, if you think they're earthbound, is to find some way to inform them and educate them. And if you might need the help of somebody, who does that kind of work, then to invoke their help. But oftentimes, it's much simpler with an earthbound spirit. For an intrusive spirit, it has to be a forgiveness ritual. And until they're forgiven, they may leave, and then, of course, have to go and face their karma, but then we don't really help them. But those are the two things that, that need to be done. One easy way of forgiveness ritual that doesn't require, it's more of psychotherapy than it is shamanic therapy, is to write a letter to help you get rid of all the terrible things that might be holding you, in a sense, from giving forgiveness and burn the letter and go and throw it in the ocean and then walk away and don't look back. But that's, unless you have spirit guides to help guide that other person over, it's going to be a little bit difficult. So often you need to go to somebody who's working with spirit guides who can assist somebody who's on the other side in the way that's best for them, although you can do your own little bit from here. If one is going to find out, about your lost loved one, and you go to a shaman or a psychic and they recommend it to you, then it's probably going to be accurate information. I'm just talking about people who dabble in the stuff and they don't know what they're doing. So, another lady came up to me and said, what about tarot? Well, tarot is as good as the person giving the cards and how well that person is connected to spirit. So there'll be some tarot card readers that are brilliant and there'll be others that don't do very well. There's some sangomas that are terrible. They may have started off real well, but either they've become corrupted by power or whatever, and now they've turned to the dark side, and their ancestors have left them. So you've kind of got to go with your heart and with your intuition. And if what they say has to do with love, and doesn't have to do with their ego, and doesn't have to do with power, and doesn't have to do with money, and it has to do with you taking responsibility for yourself and not them giving you some magical potion that's going to fix you, those are pretty good rules to stand by. But one of the ancestors came and said, not Sangoma training doesn't a Sangoma make. So shamanic training doesn't make a shaman. You end up on the dark side because of what you did in your lifetime. So it's karmically related. The consequences are that. Now, because free will is such a powerful thing and such an onerous thing, if you take somebody like Rajneesh, who's also been called Osho, here was an enlightened being. If you read his books, he was clearly enlightened. And he began enlightened, but I think, just sex, drugs, and rock and roll were too much fun. He was a guy probably who'd been enlightened in many lifetimes. I don't know this, I'm just surmising. But maybe he'd never gotten to the point where he'd been challenged by other things like beautiful American woman or money, And now suddenly he's brought into another incarnation that's probably not been an Eastern one before, and he has all these people around him and these gorgeous women, and then the next thing is, something is going on, and probably he got to the point where he said, this is just too much fun. I'm going to blow this lifetime, I don't know, but, it's all about free will, and at any time you can go to the dark side. And frequently, when you're going up the hierarchy of light, when you start to get high, it gets very, very uncomfortable. And then sometimes people just drop down, or they decide, no, to hell with this. It's just, I'd rather go for the other side. They're more fun, But it doesn't happen at the other side. It happens on this side. Suicide, has bad karmic implications in all traditions. I don't know about euthanasia, like, in Oregon, and I don't know. I know that I've actually done divinations for some people whose loved one has committed suicide, and they're okay, they're fine. But I think it depends on the reason for the suicide. Unmitigating pain, that's, or, terrible, something that's just not. I think that it depends on the circumstances with suicide. But by and large, it's what I was talking about, is that they want you to be able to handle all the hardships and the challenges, and depending on how you handle them, you will be either skillful or not skillful, and there'll be karmic implications or there won't be,